Let's talk about habits. There's a lot of talk about habits right now. Charles Duhigg, for example, wrote a book called The Power of Habits, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. Stephen Covey wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People back in the day. By the way, read the book. It's great. You'll enjoy it a lot. But those are not habits. Those are principles. There's a book called Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg, one of the best ones out there on habits. Put that together with Duhigg's book. You'll do well with those. Really good, really good. So the marketplace of information and ideas is gobbling up anything that helps us understand the power and the process of habit making and habit breaking. As far back, though, as the 1890s, the psychologist William James, in his, at that point, groundbreaking book called, wait for it, Habits, first sketched out the structure of habits as behaviors that when we repeat them, and when that repeating of them is rewarding, they seem to somehow spontaneously start and run on their own just below our awareness. I'll bet that if I ask 100 people to describe what they know about habits, 90 of them would talk about habits that they don't like, or bad habits. For a long time, I've been fascinated by the neuropsychology that drive habits, and I've also been really intrigued by the sociology of our habits. That's our neurology and our psychology and our people, the people around us. They all come together to create and reinforce our habits. It's kind of a powerful thing. This is altogether what I call the structure of our habits. So our habits, whether physical or emotional or mental, those are what we call mental models, they form our day-to-day and minute-by-minute patterns of life. So it makes sense that a lot of us want to talk about them and read about them and study them and complain about them, especially when they're other people's habits. It was Mark Twain's friend Charles Warner who said, "Everyone talks about the weather, but nobody ever does anything about it." I think that's great. I think habits are kind of like that. We talk a lot about them. We even use them as excuses for our own behavior or for not getting the results we want. Well, that's just the way I am. Or you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Or old habits are hard to break. It's like we think that once a habit forms, we're a slave to it and we have no choice in the matter. It's like the philosopher Popeye once said, "I am what I am." Well, it's not true. Let me share some things about habits and then their cousin disciplines that may surprise you just a little bit. The truth about habits is a little surprising, especially if you have habits that you have tried unsuccessfully to break. And since you're a leader or a manager or a supervisor, somebody who's responsible for influencing others to do good and to be good, you're probably very interested in what's true. You're interested even if everyone around you seems to have lost their ever-loving minds, thinking that truth is kind of whatever we feel like it is. A little bit of a sidebar here for you. Just because we don't think something is true doesn't make that thing untrue or less true. The truth is what we run into when we're wrong. Ouch. So let's take a look at the simple, powerful ideas behind habits. The truth about habits. This is some pretty important stuff. Here we go. Habits can be simple, like tying a shoe, or they can be complex, like riding a motorcycle for hours through traffic. Habits can be singular, they stand all by themselves, or they can be sequential. One habit leads to another habit, that leads to another habit. They can be mental, that is habitual ways of thinking, we call those mental models, or they can be physical, or they can be emotional. But all of them all work basically the same way. Here's how they work. First, our mind, that's our brain and our awareness, is perpetually perceiving. It puts everything that it perceives, not everything that exists or everything that is, but everything it perceives, into two buckets. It's either a threat bucket or it's a reward bucket. And our mind is very, very fast at that. It's just not accurate. And we have a lot larger threat bucket than a reward bucket. Here's the second idea. Our brain has a survival system, and its job is to keep us alive. That's why we call it a survival system. It regulates downward the amount of energy that it uses. It's all about conservation of energy. Once it perceives threat or reward, then it's about conservation of energy. So here's the third idea. One of the main ways that this survival brain does this survival thing is by creating habits. If I have a habit around something, I don't have to concentrate on it. I don't have to make decisions about it. I don't have to think about it. In fact, I don't even have to remember it. Habits save the energy that our brain and our body runs on, glucose and forms of glucose. It does so because it intentionally created, at some point, the habit. At some point, it wasn't a habit. Survival brain said, we want a habit here. We're going to create a habit here, and it's intentional. The survival brain also creates habits that operate under our awareness, so we really don't, once we practice them, once something becomes a habit, we don't create memories about it. You have no memory about where you hung your keys this morning, for example. Oh, yes, I do. I know right where they are. No, you know where the habit put them, but you have no actual memory of putting where they are. Sorry, I just made you nervous. Did I put my keys where they are supposed to be? All habits then start with triggers, or what are called cues. Those cues, those triggers, are usually time or location cues. It's 5 o'clock and it's my kitchen, for example. But there are also triggers that are emotional cues. When I feel afraid, I always go into this habit. When I feel sad, I always go into that habit. When I feel lonely, I go into that habit, for example. They can also be triggered or started by physical cues. Maybe you're hungry or you're tired. They can also be triggered by social cues. I only think of doing these things, I only do these habits when I'm with those people who also do them. All right, here's the fourth idea. Habit processes are neurologically rewarding. By that I mean they feel good when we complete the habit process. It's rewarding. The habit cycle, which is a cue, and then a routine, and then a brief anticipation, and then a reward, and then repeat the cycle, those are rewarding. They're rewarding because we get an uptake of dopamine, of norepinephrine, of serotonin. You know you've had this experience. If you skip a habit or skip a step in a habit, you feel kind of off. It's like, oh, something's not right this morning because you didn't go through your habitual routine, or you missed the step. Well, that is the power of the neurological cycle of the habit that's created. Here's the fifth idea. Habits that are threat-based habits are much stronger than habits that are reward-based habits. Habits formed to deal with fear are much faster and much stronger from a neurological standpoint than habits formed to deal with reward. Here's the sixth idea. Our mental models, that is, our mental maps of reality, are themselves habits. They're just really sophisticated mental habits. Here's the seventh idea. Adults cannot break habits. We have to replace our habits with other habits. Eighth idea, replace wrong ideas or mental model, mental habits with reality, and your other types of habits will be easier to replace. It's like the old wisdom, as you think, so you are. So you want to change any habit, change what you believe to be true that fuels the habit you're wanting to change. Really soon, you'll build or you'll crave a new habit that fits more closely what's true, what's reality, and it works on every level. Here's an example. If you believe, mental model, that sugar-free food and sugar-free drink will help you lose weight, well, you're going to be surprised when you discover reality is that sugar-free food with artificial sweeteners, for example, actually makes people gain weight because it tricks your mind into thinking that it should use insulin in a certain way. So believing you're losing weight because you're eating sugar-free food doesn't work. Here's another example. Believing you have paid your dues. This is a mental model. I believe I've paid my dues and now people owe me. Well, you haven't paid your dues and people don't owe you. So if you change that mental model, you'll change your habits that flow from it. Another example, believing you should always be happy and in a good mood, whatever that is, right? If you believe that, if you change that to, no, I don't have to always be happy and in a good mood, and understand that sometimes life is hard and sometimes it's just difficult, that's okay. Well, then your habits will flow from it. What we believe is true, our mental models create a structure in which our emotional and physical and relationship habits thrive. So think about that for just a minute. Our mental habits and our models are the soil out of which all of our habits grow. I deserve a break. I've worked very, very hard. So if that's what I believe, then I deserve to feel good. And then boom, I'm 75 pounds heavier because I fall asleep every night after eating a half a gallon of Ben & Jerry's chocolate therapy ice cream. It all came out of my mental models. Okay, so you want to start with habits? You want good habits? Well, then start with a discipline. So disciplines are deliberate. Disciplines are practices that, when done repeatedly, give us the ability to do something other than the discipline. They prepare us or equip us to do something we couldn't otherwise do if we didn't have that discipline. So working out several times a week is a discipline for me. I do it so that I can play with my 3 grandsons. Going to bed at a decent time so I can get enough sleep is a discipline. I do that so that I can have the energy that it takes to focus, to be patient, and to do good work. Those are disciplines. So disciplines, once begun, function just like habits. Once you start the discipline, there's a trigger or a cue, and then the routine, then the reward, then the setup for the next round. Except that disciplines are not triggered automatically or unconsciously by time or by location or place. A discipline is triggered by a conscious act of will. It takes no willpower to act out a habit, but it takes willpower to start a discipline, to begin the discipline. It takes a little burst of willpower. But here's the surprise. Here's the truth. Disciplines don't take a lot of willpower. They only take a little bit of willpower at the beginning. And maybe if it's a long discipline at the end so that you finish. That's it. They don't take a constant, gut-wrenching, concentrated effort. Disciplines are enacted when we use our willpower to bump start the habit. Here's another interesting surprise. Disciplined people have changed how they think about themselves. They've changed their mental model of themselves. They don't think, I'm going to go for a run, or I should go out for a run. They think, I'm a runner. They don't think, I'll be nice during this meeting this time. They think, I'm a kind person. They don't think I have to meet this deadline. They think, I'm dependable. It's who I am. It's what I do. It flows out of who I am as a person. That's their mental model. Here's a sidebar idea. If you're a leader and you think I deserve, then your habits will flow from that. If you think I serve, these are mental models, then your habits will flow from that. Apple trees produce apples. Shocker, huh? So then back to disciplines. Disciplines that are practiced just a few times become habits because our brain craves order and rhythm and patterns. You want a specific set of habits? We'll set up a discipline and it will become a habit. Follow these simple steps. 1, get specific. Describe the behavior that you want. Turn your targeted outcomes into very specific behaviors. 2, make it small, make it easy. Think about making the smallest part of the behavior easy to do. The simpler, the less willpower that it takes to focus and do it. Shrink it down to the smallest version of it. Walk around the block instead of starting to run a marathon, right? So do the smallest part and make that part routine, just a few small parts, maybe 1 or 2, and you'll be amazed how quickly that'll kick into gear for you. Here's the third idea. Prompt the behavior. Use something that will prompt you to spend a little burst of willpower to get that behavior or that discipline going. Here's the fourth idea. This is really important. Enjoy the end. Enjoy the last step. Physically and mentally pause and enjoy the last step in that habit or that discipline. Celebrate it. Just a pause, just a little burst of dopamine will be followed by a wave of serotonin when you do that. Fifth idea, repeat all that stuff. Back up, watch that, listen to this video, watch this video again. Do these steps 3 or 4 times and then don't add anything else to it while you're doing that. Once you do that, you'll now have the core of a new habit and a new discipline in place. You can add more to it later. Your brain will actually crave it. The discipline will, in very short order, become a habit. So, what about breaking habits? We're coming to the end here, so what about breaking habits? Remember, adults don't break habits, we replace them. We replace a habit we don't like with something that is as engaging or more engaging than the habit that's in place now. You do that by following these steps. So lean in on this. You may want to write it down. You may want to listen to it again. Here's how you do that. Step 1, study the habit. What are the cues? What are the steps in the routine? And what's the last thing I do just before the reward of the habit? Write it all down if you need to. It'll give you some very keen insight. Here's the second idea. Change the cue. Change the time or the location or the people that are a part of the trigger or the cue for that old habit. Replace that cue with something else that's very engaging. And all you're doing is replacing the cue. Something that captivates your attention, something that requires physical movement. Here's the third idea. If you repeat that new cue experience 2 or 3 times, your brain will pivot and crave the new habit really quickly. Here's the fourth idea. Create some friction between you and the old cue. Engineer your environment so that there's friction between you and that cue and between you and the routines of the habit that you're replacing. For example, take the ice cream off of your grocery list. Schedule a walk with someone during the time when you habitually drank a 6-pack, for example. Unplug the TV. Unplug it, right? Leave your phone in the car. Move the alarm across the room. Put your running shoes in front of the freezer. Unplug the TV in the family room and leave your phone in the car. When you get home, you'll be amazed at how powerful that actually is. Put a little bit of friction between you and the old cue. And in very, very short order, you will have replaced the old habit with the new one. We've covered a lot of ground here. You may want to back up, listen to this again, take it apart, but understand that your brain craves habits and that discipline is merely the idea of using a little bit of willpower to get a new habit going. It's fun stuff. Engineer it, put your habits in place on purpose, and change how you think about who you are so that new habits grow out of that same soil. You're doing great work. Hope this was helpful. Take care.